mean? So I don't really need it.
Yeah, my that book I have of essays didn't have Mythopoeia in it, surprisingly enough. So
Yeah, well, it's a book of letters too, right? So you'd think it would.
well, it actually it's all I think it's just essays. I think it's just his essays, and that's it.
Oh,
Like
okay.
all his essays that he published as an Oxford professor.
Well, that makes sense then.
Um, yeah, because he did one about the critics of Beowulf or something like that, about looking at it as a poem, not as a work of historical blah blah blah.
Right. Okay.
Typical Tolkien stuff. It's fun.
Typical.
Typical.
Awesome. All right.
Cool. Oh, sorry, I keep yawning. Jesus.
Oh, it's all good. All right. Well, for anyone just joining today, we are tackling Mythopoeia, which is a thing, which is an endeavor to say the least, right? So Mythopoeia is a letter slash poem, a letter poem that was written by Tolkien to one of his friends who, as this thing says here, well, it's cut off, but it says to one who said that myths were lies and therefore worthless, even though breathed through silver, which I take to mean even if it looks nice and rich and full of beauty and everything else, it's still a lie. It's still worthless, etc., etc. C.S. Lewis said this to Tolkien, and obviously he took some exception to that. And from my understanding, which maybe is different than your understanding, or maybe the same, you'll tell me, I'm sure. C.S. Lewis came to this conclusion after becoming devoutly Catholic, and finding fairy tales and myths to be insults to the true creator, which is God, right? And he became devoutly Catholic really because of Tolkien, and then decided to tell Tolkien that he shouldn't write myths because they are insulting to the God he has now found. Does that sound about right to you?
Honestly, that sounds right. The Tolkien and C.S. C.S. Lewis was a hardcore atheist, I believe, before he met Tolkien or some such. Seemed like he just hopped out of the bandwagon, but he wrote The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and those are books I read growing up, and they were pretty fun books. So it's hard to knock them.
Right.
It's very strange, though. It's just very strange. Oh, go ahead.
Well, no, I was just gonna say, like, I think even Tolkien knocks them, doesn't he?
Yeah.
I don't think Tolkien's a fan of the Chronicles of Narnia.
I wonder why.
Well, I think because C.S. Lewis explicitly talks about them as allegories for the Bible, and Tolkien doesn't like allegory.
And it's a good thing that I just read them without reading any of C.S. Lewis's commentary attached to it.
True.
And I don't give a fuck what that guy thinks.
Right.
So, yep.
Yeah. So this should be fun. There will be a lot of interpreting things that Tolkien is saying here, but we'll kind of just go stanza by stanza and talk about this. So, first stanza, you look at trees and label them just so, for trees are trees and growing is to grow. You walk the earth and tread with solemn pace, one of the many minor globes of space. A star is a star, some matter in a ball, compelled to courses mathematical. Amid the regimented cold inane, where destined atoms are each moment slain. So, this is Tolkien just saying things are things, right? And obviously we'll get more into things later, but trees are trees because we as humans named them trees, right? We know what growing is because we created that word. Um, as as we go through life, we're we're small, right? We're on one planet of many, many, many worlds. Um,
Mm.
what he goes in a star is just matter in a ball, right? Like, um, but there's something more to it, right? There's something more to all of this, right? Any thoughts so far?
No, you pretty much nailed them all. I just think the wordplay here is just beautiful.
Yeah.
It's like a song. It reads like a song.
Yeah, the rhythm of the writing is really cool. A lot of people
Yeah.
criticize Tolkien's ability as a poet and say, like most of his poems aren't that great and this and that, but his poetry really has inspired me in my own writing of poetry. So
Mm. It's very. I wouldn't call it the most complex poetry I've ever written, but it keeps up with the rhyme. Good. It's his own custom shorthand prose. It's very old Englishy, which is
mhm.
something that he dedicated most of his life to. So I think it.
Right. I mean,
Uh,
this is kind of a rhyme, ball and mathematical, but
mm,
obviously you have to. It's more of a slant rhyme than a true rhyme. I
yeah.
like the internal rhyming scheme as well, and
Mm,
so I think it all works as a poem. So
yeah.
on to the next. At bidding of a will to which we bend and must, but only dimly apprehend, great processes march on as time unrolls from dark beginnings to uncertain goals, and as on page overwritten without clue, with script and limning packed of various hue, an endless multitude of forms appear, some grim, some frail, some beautiful, some queer, each alien except as kin from one, remote Origo, gnat, man, stone, and sun. God made the petrious rocks, the arboreal trees, Tellurian earth, and stellar stars, and these homuncular men who walk upon the ground with nerves that tingle touched by light and sound. The movements of the sea, the winds and boughs, green grass, the large slow oddity of cows, thunder and lightning, birds that wheel and cry, slime crawling up from mud to live and die. These each are duly registered in print, the brain's contortions with a separate dint. Wow, that's a lot.
Mm, yeah.
Notice the
That's a big stanza.
capitalization of will.
Mm,
Go on.
no, I'm just yeah. Uh,
So, just for you guys
sorry.
to finish this thought, he capitalizes will because obviously this is the will of God, or human will or free will, right?
Mm,
Um, we ourselves bend the will of God to make choices, right? We don't fully apprehend what we're doing, but that is what we're doing. And there, as he talks about time unrolls from dark beginnings to uncertain goals, right? We don't know what's going to happen, but there is a plan, right? There is an end goal for us all, right?
mm,
Um, and he even mentions it. There's essentially a script, and all these things create something, right? And he kind of just goes on about all the things in the world, really. Like there are scary things, there are fragile things, there are beautiful things, there are really weird things, and all of these things to us are uh, foreign, right? These are all new things. These are things that we're learning about as we go through life. But eventually, not so much.
yeah, again, just the wordplay here is fantastic. How he makes the snappy transition from what he was talking about earlier, like what you were just talking about, the great process marching on, time unrolling, the uncertain goals as we move forward with this energy. a page overwritten or overwritten. How do you pronounce that specifically? The pronunciation.
Overwritten, but I just said
Overwritten.
overwritten because I didn't want to
Okay.
mess up the rhythm of the reading with
Yeah,
bad pronunciation. So
I get it. Yeah, and a giant page written without a clue. Uh, A god made the picturesque rock, the emerald trees, to the earth, the stellar stars, and these homunculus men who walk upon the ground with nerves that tingle, touched by light and sound. That's just a beautiful way of talking about how your nerves interact with the world around you. Because I read this funny joke that the brain is the only organ to name itself. Or really a brain is attached to a spinal cord that sends out little feelers to feel the world out around it.
yeah,
So I think that's just a great way to.
right. And
And
really,
and
what when you tie this back to like the whole thing about whatever C.S. Lewis is saying, like ultimately, what Tolkien is saying is, well, we interact with everything that God created while also really not interacting directly with God himself, right? But all this stuff that exists and everything that he created affects us, right? All of it, right? And these words matter when he says various hue, when he says separate dint. These are things that I think in the next paragraph or further down, uh, he'll kind of explain more. But uh, God's light is the one light, but when through us, right, we give it color, we give it essence, right? Without us, well, and everything in the world, God is just God. But with us, there's some kind of symbiotic relationship with that thought, right?
Nate, yeah, with nature specifically, and too, I also think he's pointing out maybe that you're ignoring the world going on around you and how it creates itself. The slime calling out from mud to live and die. These are each duly registered in print. The range distortions with a separate dent. It's fantastic. It's good shit, man. It's fantastic stuff.
Right. And when he talks about this, right, this is the way we see things. This is the way our brain tells us about things, right?
Mm.
Which is important. So now we get into more interesting things, in my opinion. Uh,
Mm.
Yet trees are not trees until so named and seen, and never were so named till those had been, whose speech involuted, breath unfurled, faint echo and dim picture of the world, but neither record nor photograph, being divination, judgment, and a laugh, response of those that felt a stir within, by deep monition movements that were kin, to life and death of trees, of beasts, of stars, free captives undermining shadowy bars, digging the foreknown from experience, and panning the vein of spirit out of sense. Great powers they slowly brought out of themselves, and looking backward they beheld the elves, that wrought on cunning forges in the mind, and light and dark on secret looms entwined. Um, so yeah, hey man, we have trees. We know that growing is to grow, but that's only because we named them. We gave these things their names. And by giving them their names, we breathe them into life. Because without the name, what is a tree? We wouldn't know that, right? Or we'd call it something else. Not only that, I mean, you can think of anything that means something to you, but before it meant something to you, the name was just the name, right? Uh,
Mm.
if it, think about my name, right? My name is Christian with a K, right? Boom. When people thought about Christian before they knew me, they probably thought about the religion, Christianity, or they thought about whatever else, someone else they might have known or whatever. But then after meeting me, if they hear the name, they probably think of me saying Christian with a K, or memories they have with me or whatever. And like, the name of something evokes emotion and evokes something new from you. And we give things names. And by doing that, we instill them with power. Um, you think about Voldemort, right? The name is power, right? not naming him is a big important thing. It's the same with Sauron. Like saying his name somehow gives him power, right? There is power in a name. Um, but why did we give things names, right? Like something awoke within us that inspired us to do these things, and he mentions like obviously religion is a big inspirer for these things, but he's also taking this away from religion, right? Like we had the power to name things. Excuse me. And by
All right.
yeah, I'm good. Uh, by exercising that power, we we also made elves. We also created things that aren't necessarily real, but they exist. Again, going back to something he mentions on fairy stories, like these things exist in our minds already, and therefore they're real. And that's an important thought as well.
Yeah, for me, I take a lot from the final section of the paragraph. Free captives undermining shadowy bars. It's almost like he's talking about his world building as being something that's freeing, panning the vein of spirit out of sense, taking the sense around you and then making it into a story and trying to find the spirit, the soul that he talked about, grace that can be involved in some of these stories. And
Right.
then great powers they slowly brought out of themselves, and looking backwards, they beheld the elves. Um, Rot on cutting forges in the mind. It's all good stuff, and
Yeah. I thought that was interesting the way he says free captives, right? Obviously, this is an oxymoron of sorts, right? Like, but you know, in some ways, right? If you believe in God, like we are all captives to the will of God, but we're
yep,
also free to do our own thing. We're also free to make our own choices,
yep,
which is important. Um, okay, next stanza. He sees
yep,
no stars who does not see them first. Of living silver made that sudden burst to flame like flowers beneath the ancient song, whose very echo, after music long, has since pursued. There is no firmament, only a void, unless a jeweled tent, myth woven and elf patterned, and no earth, unless the mother's womb, whence all have birth. So, if you guys are familiar with Tolkien at all before this, then you understand that this ancient song he talks about is really an echo of the creation of the world. Because that to Tolkien, right? And we could have like a 5 hour long discussion about the importance of music in our world and Tolkien's interpretation of the importance of music in life itself, right? But I don't think we have time for that tonight. So, um, yeah, is again, right? Like he's finding very beautiful ways to describe what a star is and how it only exists really because we gave it that name, but also uh unless you understand like the science behind things, which even if you do, um you don't really understand stars, right? Like we just see them, but we don't understand them. But obviously science can explain it, but um it just this like part about a star being a jeweled tent, myth woven and elf patterned, is really interesting to me. Um, and how there'd be no Earth, right, without birth.
yep,
Like our world is amazing and mythological already, without creating myths, right? Like there are extraordinary things happening all the time that defy belief, but that doesn't make them less real.
yep.
You got anything else on this one?
No, and it's kind of one of the shorter stanzas, and he pretty much said it all.
Right.
So yeah.
Okay. The heart of man is not compound of lies, but draws some wisdom from the only wise, and still recalls him, though now long estranged. Man is not wholly lost nor wholly changed. Disgraced he may be, yet is not dethroned, and keeps the rags of lordship once he owned. His world dominion by creative act, not his to worship the great artifact. Man, subcreator, the refracted light, through whom is splintered from a single white to many hues and endlessly combined in living shapes that move from mind to mind. Though all the crannies, sorry, okay, yeah. Though all the crannies of the world we filled with elves and goblins, though we dared to build gods in their houses out of dark and light, and sowed the seeds of dragons, what 'twas our right, used or misused, the right has not decayed. We make still by the law in which we are made. Um,
I think I've heard this verse before. I think it's probably the one a lot of people reference,
yeah, this was
especially.
also in On Fairy Stories. He included this part of this.
Okay, gotcha.
But yeah, this is the big one really where things kind of start to come together, right? Really, he says, right, in reference to the word lies, right, that myths are lies. Well, myths are something that we desire, right? Like he mentions this in On Fairy Stories as well. He talks about we desire to fly with the birds and explore the deeps of the ocean and things like that. And um, you know, if the heart of man is not compound of lies, well, these things already exist in our heart and our mind. Dragons, elves, right? We had ideas about these things already, and those ideas draw from God, right? Draws some
Mm.
wisdom from the only wise. That is God. um, and it's us recalling, right, how we were made, right? God created us. Therefore, part of us is the desire to create ourselves, create something that has never been created before, much like how Tolkien believes God created man and earth and the stars and heaven and everything else, things that didn't exist before him. Well, that's 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 why we create as well, because part of that is in us. Uh, you
Mm.
know, even though we are no longer, we don't talk to God or interact with Him face to face, obviously. But some people would argue, obviously, that we do talk to Him and whatever else.
Mm.
But he mentions that we're estranged from that initial creation, right? Like God created a long time ago, and now here we are today. But we still have that desire, even if we're not, even if we don't believe, even if we we are our own free people that have no affiliation or belief in a creator. We still have the desire to create. Um,
Mm.
do do do. Um, and by and he says creation is not to worship, right? We're not creating to worship God, but by creating we are really almost doing that, right? Like by creating we are giving his light new colors, right? We
Mm.
are making whole that which was singular. Um,
And you're
so
just pushing forward, with the natural progression of creativity as a whole, as a process. The
right,
ball that is the ball that is human culture in general started rolling one day with probably a story around some campfire, maybe one of the first cave paintings or something, and then it's just been one torch off the next. And
right,
we cite Tolkien as a father of modern fantasy, and a lot of modern fantasy authors like the Wheel of Time, Ursula K. Le Guin, Wizard of Earthsea. Name of the Wind, of course, all of them were probably most likely directly influenced by Tolkien, and Tolkien was directly influenced by the authors from the 1800s who we probably have forgotten about. He I think he believes he named them out in on fairy stories, but I cannot recall for the moment what they were. So, and then it just goes on and on and on. The road goes on and on. Is that the name of the song? I think.
The road goes ever, ever on.
Yep.
Yeah. Um, yeah, and that's the thing, right? Like what Tolkien is saying, right, is true. When you say the word tree to somebody, they can picture a tree, but also when you say dragon, people can picture a dragon. People can picture elves without having to have someone draw them a picture of them, right? Like, so
Yeah. And the best part about that too is that we picture a dragon. You and I probably have a very different dragon in our heads when we think about dragon because we have different experiences. East and west. The Western dragons, have four limbs. Eastern dragons are like the famous Chinese lung dragon, which is just a long serpentine body, with the big maw and the small legs and arms. It's the best part about it. The best part
right,
of creative medium. It's like what he said. Living shapes that move from mind to mind, passing the
right.
story along. It's fantastic stuff.
Yep. All right. Next stanza. Yes, wish fulfillment dreams we spin to cheat our timid hearts in ugly fact defeat. Whence came the wish, and whence the power to dream, or some things fair and others ugly deem? All wishes are not idle, not in vain. Fulfillment we devise, for pain is pain, not for itself to be desired, but ill, or else to strive or to subdue the will. Alike were graceless, and of evil this alone is deadly certain. Evil is, right? Um, yes, we create fairy tales to cheat death, or to in some ways cheat our biggest fears in life, right? We're allowed to explore. We're allowed to have big dreams in fairy tales because they're not reality. Again, kind of mentioning escapism here, but also right. These aren't things that we're doing just to do them, right? He acknowledges pain exists. It's real. It is what it is. Evil exists. It's still here. Reading a fairy tale doesn't erase the pain of the world. It doesn't erase the evil of the world. But it does try to help us through it, right?
To ease that pain. I think is probably this a good way to put it. It helps us get through the day.
Right. I guess the next stanza kind of goes along with that one too. Blessed are the timid hearts that evil hate, that quail in its shadow and yet shut the gate, that seek no parley and in guarded room, through small and bare, upon a clumsy loom, weave rissues gilded by the far off day, hoped and believed in under shadows sway. Um, so he's saying, right, the people that right, okay, so evil itself hates the blessed, right? But people who have timid hearts, people who desire this escapism are blessed because they're engaging again in what Tolkien believes is very important, right? Engaging in this subcreation, engaging in um, the things that he valued, which
Mm.
not it obviously is not necessarily something that everyone has to value.
And a lot of this speaks to individualism. I don't know. It strikes me as people that live in the shadow, like let's say an orc maybe could read a book and have their mind changed and taken out of the shadow from taking in this creative medium into themselves. And that's the people that evil hates most. And just a quick hot take on that.
Yeah. Okay. More blessings here. Blessed are the men of Noah's race that build their little arks, though frail and poorly filled, and steer through winds contrary towards a wraith, a rumor of a harbor, guessed by faith. Noah did, Noah built the ark. Noah packed all the animals on it. The ark wasn't built well. Anything could have happened. He faced a hard challenge, and he did it because he had faith. He didn't do it because he knew the outcome. He didn't do it because he was promised something at the end of it, right? He did it out of faith. And again, when you're reading a fairy story or a myth, you're putting your faith in the writer. You're putting your faith in that story. You're investing belief into something that doesn't necessarily warrant it, right? But by doing that, you get the payoff from it, right? Should I continue with the blessings?
Yeah, absolutely.
Blessed are the legend makers with their rhyme of things nor found within record time. It is not they that have forgot the night or bid us flee to organized delight and lotus isles of economic bliss, forswearing souls to gain a Circe kiss and counterfeit at that machine produced bogus seduction of the twice seduced. Tolkien hates industrialism, guys.
Hates factories. He hates it. He hates that people like having nice things and having these things made cheaply for. I don't know. Little conceited too. Blessed are the legend makers with their rhymes. Is he talking about himself?
Of course he is. Of course. I think Tolkien would find himself to be immensely blessed, wouldn't he?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, it's, he's mentioning, obviously people who create factory produced things, right? Like, that to him are more akin to lies than fairy stories, right? Like, again, going back to on fairy stories, he explicitly talks about how a tree is more real than a roof, right? Because a roof is made from tin, but we're still making it, but it's not living and breathing the way that myths are living and breathing things on their own. Even so, such isles they saw afar, and ones more fair, and those that hear them yet may yet those who that hear them yet may yet beware. I'm pretty sure that whoever put this in here didn't it maybe put some extra words.
Possibly.
Let me pull my my book. Nope, that's exactly what it says. Fucking hell. Okay. I'm just bad at reading. Such isles they saw afar, and ones more fair, and those that hear them yet may yet beware. They have seen death and ultimate defeat, and yet they would not in despair retreat, but off to victory have turned the lair and kindled hearts with legendary fire. Liar, fire, whatever. Illuminating now, and dark hath been with light of suns as yet by no man seen. Okay, so again, kind of repeating the themes that Tolkien has had throughout all of this stuff. He talks about really escaping death, right? There you go. They have seen death and ultimate defeat, right? But they don't hide from it. They don't, despair for the future and despair knowing that they're gonna die. They turn to victory. It gives it kindles something within their hearts. You can call that inspiration. You can call that having hope, whatever it is, and it illuminates, right? Shines a light on the dark that was there and shining that shines light of suns as yet by no man's seen, right? We've seen the sun, but the light that the light that we get in our heart from these external
Stories.
forces, right?
Yeah.
These stories
Yep.
is brighter than even the sun, right?
Yep.
I
Do you want
would
to read it? Do you want me to take over reading for a bit, or are you still good?
no, you can read if you want.
Sure. Sorry. I would that I might with the minstrel sing and stir the unseen with a throbbing string, and I would be with the mariners of the deep that cut their slender planks on mountains steep, and voyages upon a vague and wandering quest, where some have passed beyond the fabled west. I would with the beleaguered fools might be told that keep an inner fastness with their gold, and pure and scanty, yet they loyally bring to mint an image lord of distant king, or in fantastic banners weave the sheen, heraldic emblems of of Lord unseen.
Yeah. So, things that he can't do that he would want to do, that he would yearn to do, he can do
Mm,
through story, through fairy tale, through even subcreation. He could create those stories as well. These are things we desire. Again, we write about our desires. We read about our desires, and we can't always get everything we desire. We can't go on a quest to the Lonely Mountain and meet Smog and take some gold home with us. Like we just
unfortunately, not.
can't do it, but we can
Nope.
read about it.
And to him, it seems to be the same thing.
Yeah.
It's
And,
as real as that experience can be as real to you as any experience you've ever had.
right. But by
Trust me.
reading about it, we are experiencing it, right? Like
Mm.
it is real. Um, you want to go on to the next one?
Yep. I will not walk with you, progressive apes, erect and sapient. Before them breaks the dark abyss which their progress trends. If by God's mercy progress never ends, and does not ceaselessly revolve the same unfruitful course with changing of a name. I will not treat your dusty path and flat, denoting this and by this and that. Your world immutable, wherein no part the little maker has with maker's art. I bow not yet before the iron crown, nor cast my own small golden scepter down.
Right. Again, back to, I mean, Tolkien's taking a lot of jabs here, obviously. But
Mm,
he's not just gonna stop where he is. He's not gonna he says even if by God's mercy progress ever ends, right? Even if everything stops, even if the world stops, he's gonna continue to hold his scepter. He's gonna continue to do his thing. And he's gonna write and he's gonna read and he's gonna engage in myth and fairy, and he's not gonna I don't know if when he says Iron Crown it is capitalized. I don't know if he's referring to uh, God, right?
yeah.
Or if he's referring to industrialization, but yeah, he's not just gonna stop. I like where he says, um, the little maker has with maker's art, right?
Hmm.
Your world immutable, wherein no part the little maker has with maker's art. I think he's obviously addressing C.S. Lewis still here, and saying, right, in your world, people shouldn't create, like, which is weird, right? Like a maker doesn't actually make anything. um he's saying I don't live in that world, and even if I did I would still create. I wouldn't put down the small golden scepter he has, which you could interpret as a pen or whatever, but really it's his power to create, right?
Mm. And see, this is just something anyone that's written a story and has had to present it before people and get rejected. Was it J.K. Rowling? I know it's a little bit of a controversial example, but she submitted to what 12 publishers before she finally got a signing up with Scholastic or what have you.
Right.
something like that. And it's you really just got to stick to it. If you feel like your calling is writing and you feel like you have a story to tell and you want to put it out there for other people to read and enjoy, you really should just stick to it. And don't bow before the Iron Crown and don't throw your golden scepter down. It's inspiring
True.
stuff.
Yeah. I'll just read this last one. Yeah. In paradise, perchance the eye may stray from gazing upon everlasting day, to see the day illumined and renew from mirrored truth the likeness of the true. Then looking on the blessed land, 'twill see that all is as it is, and yet may free. Salvation changes not, nor yet destroys. Garden, not gardener, children, not their toys. Evil it will not see, for evil lies not in God's picture, but in crooked eyes, not in the source, but in the tuneless voice. In paradise they look no more awry, and though they make anew, they make no lie. Be sure they still will make not been dead, and poets shall have flames upon their head, and harps whereon their faultless fingers fall. There each shall choose forever from the all. I mean, I think this is pretty straightforward, but to get into it, right? Like, salvation isn't denied to you because you created. You're not insulting God. Poets and musicians will all be in heaven, and they'll have their pick of things that were created for them. Obviously, but yeah, this part is interesting to me. Evil it will not see, for evil lies not in God's picture, but in crooked eyes. Right? We we create that. Right? We create in the image of God. Is what he's saying. And you won't find evil in there because evil isn't seen from right. Okay, so evil doesn't exist in God's image, but it exists in the eyes of those who seek to find it, right? Like people who want to find something bad will find something bad.
And crooked eyes.
Right. Yeah, not in the source, but in the tuneless voice, is what he says. Yeah, this is interesting too. In paradise, perchance the eye may stray from gazing upon everlasting day. Right, when paradise is heaven. When you die and go to heaven, you might look away. Right, you might look away from eternity in heaven. You might look back to life. Right, and you'll see that both things are true. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Then looking on the blessed land, 'twill see that all is as it is, and yet may free. Yeah. Again, everything is real, but you're free now, right? You're free from the bonds of humanity and your life on earth. And you're free now in heaven. And I still think Tolkien would argue, right? Like you're free to still create, right? Even if when you're in heaven, like it's important still to create.
And to what he's saying, frown mates even more than you're free to create. They're saying that they'll create no matter what, no matter
Right.
where they are. These people are going to create, and that's
yeah.
perfect.
For Tolkien, creation is an inherent desire, right? Like it's something that, right? He does mention that kind of like you said, like a calling, right? It's something that it's an echo in a desire for us to create. And even within the realm of his works, right? You look at the elves and stuff like that. There are inherent callings for the elves, right? To return to the west, to go beyond the sea, right? A lot. This is stuff that in the movies can seem very, very confusing to people. But like there is this desire and ultimate necessity to return from where they came from. Geez, I mean, I could talk for hours about the elves and the purpose and why they have to go back to the west, but
probably save them for another pod when we cover the Silmarillion and the 38 hours we'll need for each chapter.
right.
I feel like this ties also into something we've recently been discussing, soul, which had a lot to say about your calling in life and what that means for you, and if it's what your spark is actually your calling, or if your calling is something much more basically metaphysical than that.
Right.
And man, it's good stuff all around.
Yeah, I mean, because this is something that you hear all the time. Is people saying, I'm in my 20s, I'm in my 30s, and I still don't know what I want to do with life. I still don't know what my purpose is, or
Mm.
whatever. And like one of the themes, kind of, and it's almost said explicitly in Soul, is sometimes
It takes a
we
while.
well not only that, but sometimes in life, uh, you know, we focus way too much on finding a purpose instead of just
Mm.
living life, right?
Yeah.
Like, and you see in the main character's name was Joe. Was it Joe?
Yes. Yeah.
You have Joe, and then this soul, number 22, and the soul lives inside of Joe because some bad things happened. I don't know. You just watch the movie. I'm not going to spoil it, but really,
Yeah. They got mixed up.
he wants to get back to living his life and pursuing his purpose, whereas
Yep.
this person never wanted to exist and is forced to exist now. And
Mm.
while they're trying to quote unquote find their purpose, they're just living life and doing life things. Like they're doing basic life human things. And by doing
Eating
that,
pizza,
yeah,
talking to people, enjoying street busker music, all
right.
sorts of stuff.
Yeah, and uh, they do kind of ultimately have almost a religious experience with a little thing falling from a tree, one of the little helicopter leaf things, right? Uh,
Yep.
and that gives them this spark, right? Like to make them realize that they want to continue living, they want to experience these things. Really, there's no purpose. They didn't find the one thing they want to be and do in life. They found a
Mm-hmm.
purpose, and that purpose was simply to live, which is something we sometimes ignore, right? And it's something that during these times with coronavirus and everything else, like we've almost been denied the ability to live our lives,
Mm.
right? Everyone's life is on hold. We'll do this when Corona's gone. We'll get back to life when it's all gone. But for some people, they'll not be alive anymore, right? They'll have
Yep.
lost their life, and in the meanwhile, they're not living at all
Yep.
before they die, right? Like we're not allowed to really live right now.
Yeah.
So
It's difficult to ask people to waste a whole year. A year is a long time for a lot of people.
yeah,
Even more so, we could be pushing into April at this, like next April at this point with how California's starting to look. So we'll just see how it goes. But
right,
I've said this before. This is me being cranky old man. That we just do seem to live in the most serial materialism. I think is probably the easiest way to put it. Where you have people like their only goal in life is to acquire the most points, yeah, as much as you can, and for no other reason, just to have them. Never to do anything with it, never to go out and live and enjoy life and do the same
right.
thing over and over. Um,
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's something too that like you and I used to work with this guy who was Rastafarian, right?
mm,
And most of the time we couldn't understand what the fuck he was saying, but one thing
he was always having a good time.
one thing he would say, which was like, was important, is when he would talk about money, and he'd always say, "You can't take it with you when you're dead," right? Like,
Yeah.
enjoy life, right? And he did enjoy life, maybe a little too much. But
I just think that job, I don't know, like
yeah,
does something to you after the after
did,
the 50 years of them.
jeez. Yeah, I got out right at 5 years.
Yeah, that's good before he went into the long-term holding pattern.
Jesus.
But he did very much enjoy life. Because you could hear him, so you knew he was always having a good. He was always having a good time.
Right.
Uh, yeah. I miss talking to that guy sometimes. I'm honest. Sometimes I do miss like the summer, like the good summers there.
Yeah, man. Like,
But anyway, moving on from that
right.
that drama. Um,
Uh,
Mythopoeia is a is a great piece of literature. I'm glad it exists. I'm glad that Tolkien was around to contribute to human culture. He's
Right.
made so many contributions, and he really inspires me. And two, I take it's hard for me to speak on like these experiences as they relate to me because they're just all I just take a lot of it for my writing because I'm passing the 10K word mark on my outline, so I'm actually halfway to something interesting for writing. So I can all right, and I'm reading a lot more now. So it's still everything I'm taking from it is so almost personal in a way. I'm sure a lot of it you take away is personal too.
Yeah, well, I mean, like, you don't have to be religious or, be of Tolkien's frame of
Mindset.
view, right? Like, you don't have to, yeah, you don't
Yeah.
have to think the way he thinks to read this, to read Mythopoeia, and come away feeling inspired or come away feeling hopeful, right? Like, the,
Mm.
even when he's partially kind of poking fun and you can even argue maybe insulting C.S. Lewis with not that, but like, I will not walk with your progressive apes, right? Like, this stuff, right? Like, it's he's poking fun or whatever, but like, you could be like, wow, man, like that's kind of mean or whatever, but like, he really ties it all together so well, and his point is well taken. Like, it's not lying to people to write myth, to write fairy stories. It's just not, right? Like, you know, it,
it's it's something sacred. I think that's probably the easiest way to convey it, at least for me, to how he's conveyed it to me. And like it's just a sacred act that's been done by humans for pretty much as long as we've been alive. The great contribution to human culture
right,
on this ball of matter we call Earth. As it moves forward, it builds up,
right. I mean, even
uh,
naming a tree is creating, right?
giving it a
Like,
story, and
yeah,
it's giving it a story.
right. That's yeah. I think this is just an incredible work of poetry. It is really long. There's like Tolkien has written quite a few long poems, um,
Mm.
but oops, obviously, like, this is a pretty big one. But let me see, because I'll see if I can find my favorite poem he wrote. It doesn't have to do with um, telling stories or anything,
Mm.
um, but it's a big part of The Hobbit. So, well, I mean, sorry, not The Hobbit. Bilbo wrote it, but it's a part of Lord of the Rings, right? It's
Mm.
called the Song of Arondale. Who is what's his face? Elrond's dad, right? Who became the North Star. He became a star. Uh, and if you've seen the
Story.
movies,
Yep.
the light that Frodo has that he uses against the giant spider Shelob is part of his light, the star. And so again, like, he's breathing so much life into these myths, and it's incredible to me. And I just love the rhythm, the meter, and the rhyme scheme of this poem. So I'm not gonna read it because it's very long. Look, it very very long. Uh, but like, yeah, like, part of poetry to me is learning how to read it too, because you have to kind of pick up on it. But that's why I like Tolkien, because it's kind of easy, right? Arundel was a mariner that
Mm.
tarried in Arverni, and he built a boat of timber felled with Nimberthil to journey. And right, like, good rhyme scheme here, right? Um,
Good pacing.
right,
You can't just kind of rhyme together. He has like them spread out evenly throughout the entire process. It's just good shit.
right. There's some weird
What
rhyming, right? Like, look at star, then rhymes with far
Mm.
in the middle,
Mm.
right? And then strands doesn't rhyme with those, right? Beneath the moon and under star, he wandered far from northern strands, bewildered on enchanted ways,
And
beyond the days of mortal lands, right? The rhyme comes later. Like that's weird. Like
That's a
it's
good one.
crazy. That's crazy to
Yeah.
me.
Well, it's good placement in a sentence structure because he was an English professor at the most prestigious university in the world.
Right.
That's the thing. We always need to give credit where credit is due. Like this guy hated editors, and it's great. It's nice to be able to hate editors when you never make any mistakes in your own grammar syntax, and you
Yeah.
never misspell anything. But not all of us can do that. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Elwing was his wife, who turned into a swan and flew to him. If you didn't know, but yeah, dude, like
That's,
the mythology in Tolkien's work is just crazy. Like literally, this is what you get, right? You get this Song of Arondale written by Bilbo Baggins, read at the Council of Elrond, and we're all just reading it as readers who haven't read the Silmarillion, who don't know who the hell these people are, and like it's really just this huge like reference to the underlying world building that exists in Tolkien.
hmm.
It's crazy.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. The all the Lost Tolkien. I haven't read any of the other Lost Worlds or any of the other. I know the additional books, the other stories from Middle Earth, some such. I haven't read any of those. I've just read Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. And I dabbled in the Silmarillion, but honestly, to me, it felt kind of like reading Moby Dick. And anyone who's like an English person that's tried the good old Moby Dick, it's a rough ride. Let me tell you, it's not easy. There's a lot of very long passages in that book about the evolutionary history of whales as we know them today. For some reason, it's kind of like Tom Bombadil, but worse. I think is the best way to put it, where it has nothing to do with anything.
Worse than Tom Bombadil? I don't think that,
Yeah,
that exists for you. I think you despise Tom Bombadil.
I do hate me some filler, but it's like I just
I,
watched so much.
I think my sister actually like is a big fan of Tom Bombadil for some reason. Like when Tom Bombadil wasn't in the Fellowship of the Ring movie, I think she's the first person who was like, Tom Bombadil should have been in this movie. So
God bless her, more power to her. But everyone's free to their own opinions in this country.
right. Yeah. I mean, I don't really know why. Like when I think maybe it's a symptom of, like you had asked me before if I feel like watching the movies before reading the books like tarnished my experience with the books.
I don't think tarn. I think more like just tainted is probably the best way to put it. Where as in like the view in your mind's eye will always be like the movie view. Like you'll imagine these characters as these characters.
Right. Well, I think it does have an impact where like when you're reading the books, you look forward to like the things you saw in the movies and like reading how they're different. Whereas like when you have characters like Tom Bombadil, you're like, what the fuck? Like he wasn't in the movie. Like the movie worked perfectly. Like they're okay. They're leaving the Shire. They're going to Bree. Like it's a great sequence. And then you read the book and you're just like, yo, why are we lollygagging with a fucking weird ass dude? Like, you know, I,
Frodo just waits 20 years in the Shire. That's one thing that always surprises a lot of people in their first read.
yeah,
It's like, oh, 20 years, and then 20 years go by.
right. And then like, I think people do get confused by the map a little bit as well, and don't really realize uh, like the Barrow Whites and stuff confuse people. Like the Kingdom of Arnor, confuses people. Like there's a lot in the books that can be confusing to new readers who only watch the movies, and like, but you can also take a step back and be like, okay, well, I definitely understand why this wasn't in the movie, right? We don't need Frodo in the old king's grave or whatever. Like, we don't need certain things. We don't need the Barrow Whites. We don't need Tom Bombadil. And they kind of really just serve to distract from the core narrative that the movie is trying to tell. And again, we mentioned this yesterday, but it's important for people to understand that you should never go to a movie based on a book and expect it to be the same because it never will
Yeah.
be, and it
And
shouldn't
it's
be.
yeah, and it's someone else's vision. That's another very important thing. It they rewrite the entire script. They have to make it a screenplay. It's something that they have to do. And in the process of rewriting, someone eventually makes, unless they do a complete one-to-one translation. But I don't think that's ever happened
Well,
for
you
any
can't.
book. Yeah.
Like that's the thing is like when to me this is the greatest failing of the first two Harry Potter movies is that
Mm.
Christopher Columbus, Chris Columbus, sorry, the director who worked on those, he was afraid to upset fans, so he tried to keep them as close to the books as possible. The problem is you can do things in literature and writing that you can't do through a visual storytelling form. So when he got
Yep.
to those parts, instead of trying to change something to make it all make sense and work, he just simply skipped past it. And what ended up happening is you have people given their dialogue lines from the book with zero context, so it makes absolutely no cognitive sense when you watch the movie. I had an argument with my friend about this before for literally an hour as I tried to explain to him that Hagrid's lines in the hut make zero fucking sense as a person with a brain because his whole, it's a great line, guys. We all know it. You're a wizard, Harry, right? We all know it. Everybody knows it. But if you listen to the lines that are said, it does not, no human talks like that. It makes zero sense. But they wanted to
Yeah.
give him the lines without making the adjustments to make it make sense. And you just can't do that.
It's just creative mediums, man. Someone's always gonna be butthurt no matter what happens, especially with the internet around these days.
Right. Uh,
um,
what the?
what else did you?
Um. Let me just find this because I I just want to prove my point here.
There you go. It's very important.
Yeah. Well, because without like the exact quotes, it's hard to make it make sense. But do you have anything else about Tolkien?
No. Aside from what topic we're eventually going to cover next week, what did you want to move on to?
Um. Well, that's the question, isn't it? What can we move on to? Wait, why is it still on that? I closed that window. God damn it. Um, we can always move on to like the Silmarillion or the Hobbit or whatever, like, or we can just talk about general like things because aside from the books as a whole, I think people are largely familiar with the Lord of the Rings, so we can always just tackle some like more like fun or interesting questions.
Yeah, we
Um,
could do movie rankings too, or just talk about our experience with the movies.
yeah, I mean there aren't many movies to rank, but
There's three. Hey, go good.
uh,
I don't know. Honestly, it's been a long time since I sat down and watched the movies. I'm gonna need to do that at some point.
yeah. I mean, I haven't
We
watched
could talk
in like 2 years now, or maybe a year and a half. Yo, where is Chrome? Holy shit, man! Jesus Christ, my computer's so stupid, man.
it's all good. It happens. But sorry if I seem a little out of sorts tonight. Just got a little bit of a headache.
Oh no, it's all good.
Uh, but I also do have to go for right now for a bit. So,
Oh, no
but it was
worries.
fun. I really enjoyed covering Mythopoeia. And that's just a great poem. I'm probably gonna go back and reread it a couple times.
Yeah, man. Yeah, it's something that really like. Even though we spent an hour talking about it, like you
Yeah, it needs to soak in. I think is the best way to probably describe it.
right,
With especially with poetry, especially you just need to really take things in, go on a walk, think about it when you're drinking coffee, think about it when you're sipping tea, all that good stuff.
right. All right. Well, I'll let you go then. I think we're starting
You
to.
gotta defend your you're gonna defend your Harry Potter thesis here.
Okay, look it right.
All right, I'm
Uh,
looking.
ex- who are you? All right, hey, you're a keeper of the keys. Blah blah blah. Hogwarts. Uh, right. You'll know all about Hogwarts. Sorry, no, no. Blimey, Harry, didn't you ever wonder where your mom and dad learned it? What does that have to do with? Sorry, no. He doesn't do any
Yeah,
explaining, right? Like you have no context here. Didn't you wonder where your parents learned it? Like learned what? You're a
he never.
wizard. None of this
Yeah, he
makes
never met.
sense. Nobody talks
He
like
never met
this.
his parents. Yeah, he never met his parents.
Right. Like without the context of the book, this makes no sense to anybody.
Yeah,
That ultimately is my point. Learned what? You're a wizard. I'm a what? A wizard, right? Like we get it. You're a wizard, right? But there's no like this doesn't explain anything. He still doesn't know what Hogwarts is.
mm.
Like at the end of this discussion, we still don't know what Hogwarts is.
Yeah, it's definitely a little. But it's a Sorcerer's Stone, and it was like the kiddiest of the kid movies. I don't know. I was
Right.
rewatching actually the half. I rewatched the Half Blood Prince, the movie lately, and that's probably got to be my favorite out of all the
Mm.
trilogy movies because that movie just kicks ass. That's just everyone's at their best.
Yeah, yeah,
Um.
yeah. All right. Well,
Anyway,
thanks
thanks
again.
for no problem.
Much
See
love.
you later.
Yeah, have a good one,
Much love.
Cher.
Peace.
Thanks for joining.
Yep.
Thanks everyone for watching. We'll see you again next